Have you ever had one of those conversations that you leave feeling so much better than when you went into it? Well, yesterday I had one of those conversations, and that's what you're about to hear between myself and John Morin. He's one of my good friends that has a podcast called the Pilgrim-ish podcast. And his tagline, his motto for that podcast is travel adventurously, connect meaningfully, and live intentionally. And he wanted to interview me on his podcast, which I was so excited about and thankful for in the first place. And I also let you know at the end of the last podcast that I wanted him to interview me for this podcast. What ended up happening from our conversation is something that both of us loved so much, that was such a great mix from the Rethink Pain side of things and the Pilgrim-ish, that we're both going to use that same conversation for our podcast. Just he has a bit of a different intro than what you're hearing right now. I recommend, though, check out his podcast as well, because he's got some extra content that he's going to have that's going to be awesome. I'll let John fill you in on what we're going to talk about. However, be sure to listen right to the end, because I teach John one of my favorite techniques to improve how you feel, laughnosis, and I think I'm still recovering from the hilarity of that moment. After you're done laughing along with us, thank you in advance for interacting with this podcast by sharing it with your friends, giving it a rating on iTunes or SoundCloud, wherever you're listening, because that just gets this message out there to more people. So thank you very much for helping this out. But first, cue the music.
Welcome to the Rethink Pain Podcast, empowering mind, body, and spirit. And now your host. He's a first Dan black belt in Haidong Gumdo, a Korean sword fighting martial art, Danyel Dagenhart.
Yikes. Sorry, Evan. Forgot to give you the memo that I'm not the host today. So, John, why don't you tell him who you are?
I'm your host, John. On today's show, I have with me Danyel Dagenhart. He's a physiotherapist and creator of the Rethink Pain Workshop. I actually met him because I started going to his Haidong Gumdo class here in New Zealand, and I'm really excited for the conversation that we're going to have today. We talk about pain, but also mindset, things about culture and travel. So it's a really exciting chat that we'll have today, and thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
So tell me and the listeners a little bit about your background.
So I'm 32 years old and was born and raised in Canada. I lived across Canada from Saskatchewan to the East Coast and a bit in the West as well. And I graduated with my master's in physio back in 2010, I believe. Spent a couple of years as a new grad working in northern Alberta, and then 3.5 years ago moved to New Zealand with my wife and our 2 dogs and 1 cat, Bonnie and Clyde and Oscar.
So you moved to New Zealand 3 years ago. I've had a couple of episodes, which I know you've actually listened to, where I've talked a bit about cultural differences and the challenges that expats face when they move to a new country. I know you said you listened to that episode and that triggered some interesting conversations. So I was curious to hear your take on living abroad here in New Zealand and what some of those conversations were.
Yeah, so when my wife and we were actually on our way to Auckland to take a flight down to Queenstown for a vacation over Christmas and New Year's. We're going to be doing a couple hikes then. And we did a bit of a binge and listened to a couple of yours. And when you talked about being the expat and going into the new country and those phases of the honeymoon phase and how everything is wonderful and amazing at first, but then I think there's that one line about how when you try to get a little bit deeper into those relationships, it was almost that friendship was held at an arm's length, and that you couldn't quite break through. I thought that was a really interesting thing, because that's definitely something that I've moved around, probably 15, 20 times in my life. And I've experienced that wherever I move. But when you move to a whole new country, people love that you're here and appreciate that you're here, but it's hard to get into those groups sometimes.
Yeah. So prior to listening to that, what were some of the things that you've done? Because you said you've been here three and a half years?
3.5 years, yeah.
That you've done to sort of help assimilate and make it go more smoothly?
To be honest, some of the steps that you had, the advice that you gave, would have been beneficial to hear 3.5 years ago. We've joined like certain clubs. So the Haidong Gumdo was something that I started 3 years ago. It was only within the first year. I tried to get into a Taekwondo club, but there wasn't anything close by. And then Sean Cromwell, he was a patient of mine. I worked with him for physiotherapy, and he said, "Hey, when I get this club going, you should come join." And I went and brought Ashley along. We thought it could be a cool challenge for us that we could do together. And Sean's passion and excitement got us excited about it, and we jumped right into it. So that group of friends that we've got from that club has been amazing, but also work-related friends. But your advice of reaching out to other expats was actually something that we did naturally.
Yeah.
We have a couple good friends that are Canadian and American, and it's comfortable, I guess, having those relationships. And I guess you reach out to those people that are looking for that connection. And we do have some really close friends that are New Zealanders as well. But it's probably just that little bit easier to jump into those expat relationships, I think. Yeah,
I remember when I first got here, I almost was of the mindset, like, to try and not really... Not that I would ignore other expats or Americans or something like that, but I don't know, it almost felt like I'd be cheating, like you know, like really immerse yourself in the culture and with the locals. Like, I didn't want to sort of set myself apart with just other expats. But then I've taken a much more sort of forgiving stance and realize how it's healthy and helpful to have all those types of relationships. And just some friendships or relationships help in different ways, and certainly meeting people who have a shared experience makes the experience, while you're still going through it, that much more easier, because you have that point of connection that you can talk on, or even if you don't talk about it, that understanding is there, which makes you feel a bit more comfortable, at least for me. So that's awesome. The next thing I wanted to talk about, because we mentioned you're a physiotherapist, you've created a workshop called Rethink Pain, and I've gone on the website and I've looked through some of the modules and the videos, and found a really interesting connection with my own interest in mental health issues, because a lot of what you talk about is mindset, and what you think about pain actually affects your experience with it. So I thought it would be interesting, before we go into those deeper details, if you want to explain maybe a bit on why you created this workshop, and like what the main focus is, and then maybe some bullet points of what someone could expect if they were to go through it.
Well, the Rethink Pain Workshop is something that I created in partnership with the Bay of Plenty District Health Board. I have a role as a community physiotherapist that I wanted to create a pain education program for Whakatane, but then to use it as a launching pad to give education nationally and internationally. And that stemmed from something that happens almost not by choice, but because there was a need. Because when I was a new grad as a physiotherapist working in a really rural, northern, isolated Canadian town, there was only about 6,000 people, and as new grads we went in and they had never had full-time physios there. So there was a need for people to have physio services, but the wait list was almost up to 2-3 years long.
Wow.
So I needed to help them before they came in. So I looked around and found Neil Pearson, who's a physiotherapist, yoga instructor, and purchased the rights for his presentation, Live Well, Overcome oh shoot, Overcome Pain, Live Well Again. That's the one. Sorry, Neil. And I did that every 2 weeks for the next 2 years. And I started to see some small little shifts about, just by educating people about what pain is, how it works, and what you can do about it. Our little community made some shifts, and I helped people overcome some of their pain. So coming to New Zealand, I wanted to do that, but I had my own unique experience.
Yeah.
And that's because I have a condition called Miller-Hiostosis, and it's a rare condition that affects only 1 in a million people, which my mom, I know she said when I was younger, I'm 1 in a million, but now I actually am. I didn't get a diagnosis until I was about 27, but it's a progressive bone condition that in my right hand, the bones continue to grow in irregular ways. And it's something that the primary symptom on diagnosis is usually pain.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've had lots of aches and pains and restrictions from things that I was able to do. For example, even riding a bike or writing when I was a teenager in early 20s, I would only be able to do it for 30 seconds or a minute. I need to shake up my hand. And that's because that bone went in and impacted my nerve in my wrist and gave me carpal tunnel symptoms. So I've gone through a lot individually, and I always had that knowledge that I could do something about it. I was a smart enough kid, and I figured, I don't know what this is, don't know exactly what I'm going to be able to do, but I have the ability to improve. And then all of the techniques and the knowledge and the principles and models that I learned, I put together in and used with my physiotherapy clients. And if it worked for me, then I'd use it with my clients. Yeah. And if it worked for them, then I put that into the workshop to create just an opportunity to show people they do have that ability to improve. So I think that's the big idea from the workshop, is just to give them that foundation. And then all the rest that I've done since then is just to add more tools.
So can you talk on some of the tools or tenets and activities that are present in your workshop to give people an idea of some of the things they could even do today that could help with pain management? So
my 2-hour workshop that I do in person, but also have the videos online, I teach first a really simple idea of what pain is from a neuroscience approach, and then I jump into the tool that I developed called the pain game. Now, the pain game, it's meant to be a bit cheeky because I want to bring a bit of childhood curiosity into the tools. Because pain is serious, I know that. But it doesn't mean that tools in the education have to be. And if you can bring a little bit of lightness and laughter and curiosity into it, it's going to be help. And I also wanted something simple, something easy to remember, and using all of the different research that I've done in my life in a simple way. So the tool I teach is called the pain game, and it stands for pause, assess, improve, and nourish. And it's meant to be played anytime that you're impacted by pain. One side note with this tool is that I've had lots of people from mental health backgrounds, but also mental health people working in mental health, therapists, ask me, hey, can I use this for mental health conditions like depression and anxiety? And I usually say I don't have that expertise in that area, but the principles and the tools work, and if you can use it in that area, then go for it. Because the first step is one that crosses both those boundaries. Pause is just being mindful about your experience. Responding to that experience of pain instead of reacting to it, which is same for if you are having that feeling of anxiety. Well, if you react and then, oh man, I'm feeling so anxious, then that's going to build and build. Whereas if you just take that step back, be mindful of not just what you're feeling for that, but all the other sensations in your body, what's happening around you, the things that you see, you hear, you feel, all of that, and just be acknowledging it without judgment. That's the first step, to just start at a baseline. And so that's what pause is all about.
So is that almost like, it almost sounds like meditating, like just being still and just taking note, basically?
Taking note, being aware. John Kabat-Zinn is a mindfulness guru he brought mindfulness to the Western world, basically, a couple decades ago. And he talks about mindfulness being in the present moment with a focus and being non-judgmental. And there's the difference between words like mindfulness and meditation and self-hypnosis. They all have similar links. But I think that idea of being present and being non-judgmental, that's always, I find, the hardest part.
Yeah.
You can be present and in that moment, but if you're being judgmental and saying, my ruddy old back, I'm not going to be able to do this and this, and I can't do, well, that's feeding into that negativity.
You're almost priming yourself to, I guess, make it worse or make it more noticeable.
Yeah, definitely. So that's where pause is just starting with a clean slate, acknowledging things for what they are and being okay with what they are too. So once you pause, then you go to assess. And there's 3 questions you ask yourself. First is, what makes me feel better? We know when it comes to pain or even anxiety, those feelings of depression, we know the whys that make us feel bad. But what we often don't ask ourselves is, what makes us feel better? And the interesting thing about using empowering questions like, what makes me feel better, is your mind will give you an interesting answer. And usually the first answer, no matter how ridiculous it is the most correct. So if you ask yourself, what makes me feel better? And think of, spending time with my friends. And then, maybe that's part of your solution to make you improve how you feel.
Yeah. Versus
if you think of, I love being out in the ocean. Well, I'm in the middle of a city, so I can't go into an ocean, but maybe I can play a little bit of ocean waves lapping on the shore. That might help me. So that first question of what makes me feel better is getting into finding out that answer for yourself. And then you ask, is my mindset of pain affecting how I feel? So you've talked about the mindset and how that can affect how you feel in a very big way.
Yeah.
And if I have a mindset that the pain I feel is the worst thing that could ever happen, it's holding me back, and it's really negative, well, just thinking about that is going to bring and build that negativity, that pain. Versus if my mindset is that pain is something that is protecting me, that is there to change my behavior in positive ways and to help me improve and heal, well, that's going to be a much more productive mindset to have.
I'm not sure how well this connects, but I just had something pop up in my head.
Yeah.
I was watching a TED Talk, and I think I may have mentioned this in one of my previous episodes briefly. If I didn't mention it, it did go into part of my research for that episode anyway. And they were talking about the experiencing self and the remembering self. And the speaker was talking about pain or discomfort. So in this test, the patients would, I forget if they were getting some sort of surgery or something like that created discomfort or pain. And for one group, they would have more sort of, I guess, measurable pain, but then the actual session would extend longer so that they had more time towards the end of sort of a come down and relaxing, whereas the second group had sort of less pain, I guess, sort of administered, but then the session was cut short, so that was the last thing that they remembered. And they were comparing how, even though their experiential pain during that time was different, those who actually experienced less pain, but that was the last thing that they focused on, actually remembered it being worse than the first group.
Yeah. And
I thought that was fascinating, and when I saw it, I thought of you as well.
Yeah. Well, and this might be the same study, or it might be a bit different, but it was with looking at the pain for colonoscopies. Is a study that is that?
I think that might have been it, actually. Yeah.
So that's a really interesting one, because it talks about that experience of pain. And so what they were doing is at regular intervals, they were measuring their pain throughout that whole process of the colonoscopy that can take anywhere from a half an hour to an hour and a half. And yeah, they could have 1s and 2s out of 10 for that entire process, but right at the ends, maybe taking the device out of the buttock, which would probably be a bit uncomfortable, or the anesthetic is wearing off, and then they jump up to a 9 out of 10, even if it's just for that 1 minute, if that's how they finish off that experience, afterwards when asked to rate that pain, it's at that 9 out of 10, or it's close to it. Versus if it was right near the beginning, they had a lot of pain, and you had that 1s and 2s to finish off, it's not as bad. So how you finish a procedure or a technique, and that was a really interesting look at that, and showing that our experience of pain is distorted in really interesting, specific ways. That's really awesome. I love that study. I love the stuff like that. So that was talking about that mindset. But even if you take that one step further with the mindset, if you go into that procedure of the colonoscopy thinking it's going to be the worst pain that you've ever experienced because your brother told you and this other person told you, and then you watched an article or read an article and said it was the worst thing ever, you're probably going to remember that experience as being negative, versus that it's something that can be positive and help to diagnose something. And if you focus on that, you're going to experience pain in a different way too. So going back to the pain game, so you've paused and then assess. The third question you ask when you assess your experience is, am I safe? It is such a massive thing to think about safety in your own self. And I've done this with so many people that so many groups that I just get everyone to say, all right, after 3, we're going to say, I am safe. And everyone will say, I am safe. Okay, you didn't really mean that. But you can pick out those grumpy old people that are just, no, I want to be and feel this pain, and I want to be in that negative space. They may not realize it, but they'll say something like, I'm safe, like muddled, and no, you don't believe that. But if you just say, I am safe. Am I safe? If you're being attacked by a shark and you need to get out of the water, well, you're not going to use the pain game because you need to get out and you're not safe. Or if you need to call an ambulance because something actually is substantial, well, you do that first, put yourself safe, get yourself safe, and then even if an ambulance is coming, okay, am I safe now? Yeah, now let's use the technique. So that's what assess is about, to determine what makes me feel better. Is my mindset of pain affecting how I feel, and am I safe? Then you go to improve. Then you do something about it. And you have to do it immediately. And so if you're having persistent pain, it might be a lot. But just simple, easy techniques. And those are the things that I love to teach, are things that you can do with no one realizing in public in a very short amount of time. Those are my favorite techniques. And then things that engage your body and your mind. And then finishing off, N is nourish. So that's acknowledging the work that you've done. If you've played the pain game, you've paused, you've assessed, you've done something to improve how you feel, you've done something to nourish your body. And I think that's that acknowledgement and that gratitude of doing something makes it more powerful. So that's what the 2-hour workshop is all about, is going into the research behind each of those steps, giving examples and showing people that there is that ability to change.
So what would be some of those techniques that they could use, I guess, in the improvement area? Like, for example, I know in a couple of your videos, you talk about some of the, dopamine and oxytocin and ways you can actually elevate those in your body just by doing really simple things. Yep. So there's a simple acronym called DOSE. So it's dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Those are those feel-good, powerful hormones in our body that help us improve how we feel. And at any given time, there's certain levels of all of those hormones in our body. But when we do things, they'll have higher levels. And if we do them intentionally to produce those hormones, then I feel like there's a little bit more power in it. So something like exercise can help elevate dopamine, and then if you're exercising with someone else, you get that oxytocin, which is that connection, that hug drug type of a thing. And serotonin is the showing that gratitude. So if you exercise and then afterwards think, oh man, that was a great workout, I'm glad I did that. And then the endorphins are those feel good that are occurring when you're experiencing that positive event. So by exercising with someone else and being happy that you did it and thankful for it,
you're getting all of those feel-good hormones, and that's one example.
Yep.
There's so many different ways, specific ways for each of those hormones through the research that's been done in those areas to produce those things. And I think that's really powerful.
And so it doesn't just elevate mood. I think, like with dopamine, did you say with elevated levels that actually elevates the pain threshold as well?
Yeah, so if you think of, so euphoria is something that you experience when you have a high amount of dopamine in your body. And if you think back to that really amazing, that moment that you're really in that moment, that you might have been at the top of a mountain after a hike, or maybe it was at a birthday party and everyone was singing happy birthday and you're just kind of feeling awkward, but in that moment, you feel nothing but good. You don't feel sensations of pain when you're in those euphoric moments. And so when you have those moments where you're really in it and enjoying yourself, those are the times that pain threshold is changed because it doesn't need to protect you.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying yourself and you feel safe and you're really happy and excited to be there, then there's no reason for pain to protect you.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons I was drawn to this particular one, and as we mentioned before, the sort of overlap between not just physical wellness, but mental wellness, because for a lot of people experiencing mental health issues, a lot of times it's those hormones that are actually low or, out of whack.
Yeah.
And because, I've done that before where I go exercising and maybe I listen to a song that I really like while I'm exercising and I can feel my mood elevate. So it's just interesting to see that overlap and how simple so many of the techniques are that, people can use it when they're traveling. Because I feel like, or I suppose just in the same way mental health issues could be daunting for someone to try and travel while dealing with it, which I spoke about in my previous episode. I'm sure chronic pain must be the same thing, but so you've been able to travel and deal with these issues of chronic pain, right?
Yeah. And right now I'm doing better than I ever have in my entire life. And that's because of the techniques that I've used with myself. And it's still an evolution. I still, with this condition in my hand, I still get aches and pains. And after having a couple weeks off from the Haidong Gumdo, the Korean sword fighting martial art, going back into the class, and then doing a lot more work on the computer, I've re-aggravated a little bit and I've gotten a little bit more sore in my hands because those muscles just weren't ready for it. I went back into it too quick. So I know I need to put on the hot packs and use, this morning I put on a hot pack and I used some essential oils, just a peppermint one, just because I like the smell of it and it makes me feel a little bit nice. And then these conversations, I definitely don't feel anything right now. Yeah. Just having a good conversation with someone. And when I'm traveling, the one really interesting thing, I'll use an example just last year. So we went, after 3 years of being in New Zealand, my wife and I went back to Canada for 5 weeks, I think it was. It was a really big trip. We stayed in 13 or 15 different places over those 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So it was nonstop, go. Lots of fun, lots of people, a lot of planning for it. And one of the things that I'm still working on myself is I get fluctuating headaches that have a variety of triggers, and I still haven't quite gotten to the center of it. Yeah. And up into that vacation, that holiday, I was getting quite a bit of them, especially the stress of putting all of that. But one of the things that got me through is knowing that when you're actually in that holiday and you're traveling, I barely got a headache at all. It was probably the best I'd felt for 5 weeks. And the times where I did feel a headache come on, I just used a technique and it had a better effect because I was in a positive environment with friends and family, doing engaging, entertaining things. And it was a really powerful experience to go feeling that consistent pain for the months going into it, not at a level that had to stop me all the time, but that I had to do things about it, to then for 5 weeks feeling great. And that's one of the powers of travel, is it helps to reset, and all of those fears and anxieties that you might have going into it, when you're actually in that moment, you're getting so many of those feel-good hormones, the dopamine, the oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, that you're going to feel better.
So when you were on the road and traveling, even though you said the majority you felt great, for those few moments where they did pop up, what would be like a technique that you might use?
So I would, the pain game for me is something that's just integrated into my life.
Yeah.
And I've tweaked and changed it, but I look at using those principles myself. So if I felt the headache coming on, and I would look at my schedule and see, all right, tonight I'm supposed to be going and hanging out with some friends, but I have this hour. What can I do for myself, for self-care in this hour that I could just be watching some TV or whatnot, or maybe hanging out with some of the other friends or family and squeezing that time in, or I can go and do a meditation, or I can go for a walk, or maybe have a nice shower, or do something for myself. Yeah. And I think putting time and making sure and scheduling in that self-care is really important.
Yeah.
Sometimes I didn't need the self-care because the things I was doing naturally, going out and engaging with friends I hadn't seen for so long time, having conversations, I was feeling good because it was novel, it was new, it was interesting. But if I went too much too fast, I knew, okay, you know what, I just need a bit of time for myself and to do some of these things that I know work.
Yeah. So I guess before I move into the next point, it just made me think, so we'll give more information at the end about where they can find your Rethink Pain Workshop, but it's something that you do in person, but it's also online. So I guess if people were interested and were about to travel, they'd be able to access it while they traveled and sort of see how it helped them on the way. Yeah,
that's actually a pretty interesting use of it. I think that's a really solid. I never even thought about that. So that's thank you for bringing that one up. I think that's an excellent point. Because I started the physical workshop in Whakatane as a launch pad, but I knew I wanted to grow it. But it's true. All the techniques, all of the things are on the website. So it would be a really positive tool for travel. I never thought about that.
And because, can I mention, because earlier you said you were thinking about even creating something like a Facebook group that had like a 7-day challenge.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you want to talk about that
Yeah,
briefly.
sure. So I see a lot with community, and I know that's something that you're working really hard and doing really well with the Pilgrim-ish, is creating that community. And when you have that support, it makes these things a little bit easier. Even talking about that expat type stuff, having that support makes a big difference. And so one of the small little things I want to look at in the future is doing a 7-day Rethink challenge, Rethink Pain challenge. Because the word rethink, the definition of it is a reassessment, one that leads to changes being made. Yeah. So if you rethink the experience of your own pain, then that's going to give you that potential to improve. So I want to do a 7-day challenge. It'll probably be 7 days for $7, something really simple, just to get some of this information about each day getting the research behind something like dopamine, and then a technique to make it better. So then that first day, you do something for dopamine. Maybe it's a bit of exercise or listening to music, like you said. And then the next day would be oxytocin. And each day having a new technique to just use and see how much better you feel at the end of the week. I think that's a good one. But I also have the Rethink Pain community. We have a Facebook group that is starting to grow and get some momentum, that if you have a question, you just come on. I think that community is such a big thing.
It is, for so many things. Pain and mental wellness. That's why it's such a big, that's why to my tagline about connecting meaningfully, because I know how important it is to have that support system. And I know you know that there's a bunch of studies showing how much people improve, I guess, across the board in any issue when they actually have that support system in place. So that's awesome that there's that option. And I think, if you do create that, I think a lot of people would be interested.
Cool.
So next, I want to know if there were any specific success stories that listeners might find interesting to sort of show how utilizing your workshop has benefited someone.
Yeah, there's a lot of really amazing stories so far. It's been running for about 2 years, first from the hospital and now privately. And my favorite example, though, is from one of my favorite people who attended the workshop a couple times. And this was back over a year ago. We had a get-together of people who had attended just to see what was working, what didn't. And she is a lady that referred like 6 of her friends coming in and has done so much for the workshop since it started as well. But she told the story. She said, a couple weeks ago, I was just getting ready for bed and I was getting under my covers, turning off the light, and I just noticed this really bad low back pain. I have a history of back issues, but this is the worst it had felt in like 2 or 3 years. And I thought, what am I going to do about this? Am I going to have to call one of my neighbors to help me out? Or even worse, the ambulance? And then she remembered, oh wait, no, there's the pain game that Daniel taught me. I've been using it for a while. I'm going to use it. It's been helping so far. I'll use it right now. So she paused and was just mindful about her experience of what she was feeling. And then when she assessed, she thought of what she'd been doing, and she thought, you know what, I haven't fallen over and I haven't hit it or picked up anything heavy, so I am safe. That idea, yeah, I'm safe. I didn't do anything bad. This is something I can improve. So she went on to the improve step and thought, what can I do with the lights off, in bed, alone, in the dark? Oh yeah, if I smile, that produces those feel-good hormones in my body that can help improve how I feel. So I'm just going to put the biggest, goofiest grin on my face and just hang out in this position. So a couple minutes go by and I'm smiling. And then I thought, you know what, what if I die from this and the ambulance driver comes in? Am I going to have this smile stuck on my face? And I chuckled. And then I thought, it worked. I feel better. Fell asleep, woke up feeling fine.
Wow.
So the power in looking at going from the worst pain she had felt in 2 or 3 years to no pain at all and being able to comfortably fall asleep with the smile and the intention that it was going to help. That is the absolute fascinating use of this tool, the best way that you could use it.
That's amazing, and that would be a good way to be found, I guess, if you passed away.
Yeah, just a big smile.
So it's interesting because hearing the success stories, knowing that you've done work here in New Zealand and you started off in Canada. I know we spoke briefly before, but I thought it'd be interesting to touch on, I suppose, the difference in cultures or where you're teaching this workshop or these ideas, how that affects the way that you teach it?
Well, the biggest thing, so there's one research study it's a qualitative research study on pain education, and it's looking at a group setting similar to what I was doing, because I did a lot of research not in just pain but in how to give that education. I did a lot of research on the neuroscience of learning and how we learn and connect and remember things. And there's 2 studies that looked at a group of, say, 10 people, I think it was, and how effective that 2-hour workshop was for them. The people that came out of it and said, you know what, that's great information, but it's not relevant to me, they didn't make any changes. But if they saw a little bit of relevance in that education, then they took on some of it. And then the people that came out thinking this is exactly what I need made the biggest improvements. So when I'm giving education, I always start off by saying, this is a workshop. You need to put in the work. I can only provide the opportunity for this change to happen, but you need to find the relevance in it.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part. If someone comes in and it might be the exact right piece of information that they need, but if it's not relevant, they don't see it as relevant, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I do is look at that person's model of the world. And we were talking before about the difference between Canada and New Zealand and how I've been giving this education in 2 different countries.
Yeah.
And now I've had people in the United States and Australia learn about this stuff as well. And the principles, the education is for the most part the same. But I might change how I give that information using different metaphors. If it's a person who is a gardener versus someone who is a mechanic, a true Kiwi bloke, that she'll be right, that mentality of I'll be all right, I don't need to do anything about it. Well, that's okay if you have a minor ankle sprain, and yeah, she'll be right. But if you have a progressive condition or long-standing persistent pain, she won't be right. You need to do something to change that behavior, or else it's not going to improve.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is finding ways to give the education that connects with the most amount of people.
So having, worked through this for a couple of years now, what would you say is your favorite technique?
Well, I have a lot of things that I like to do. Juggling is one of them. Laughnosis is probably one of my go-tos these days as well.
What's laughnosis?
With a little bit of trepidation in your voice there. So laughnosis is it's a technique that I've used in meetings at the office. If my wife is having a bad day and I can tell, then I'll say, yeah, okay, we're going to do some laughnosis. Or sometimes if I'm having a rough day, I'll just go off into the private bathroom at work and then just do some laughnosis. And it's a really simple technique. The idea is it combines laughing with intention in different ways and movement in order to just depotentiate the brain, to basically just override whatever you're feeling. And it's, I talked about the experience of smiling. Even if you don't smile because something is funny or laughing, just putting a smile on your face produces those endorphins. So if you laugh with intention, even if it's not because you didn't hear a funny joke, you just laugh, ha! Well, that produces some of those feel-good hormones. So laughnosis is the best combination of movement and mental. It gets everything, and I just love doing it.
Could we try that real
Definitely.
quick? Yeah.
All right. So, and anybody listening, they can follow along if you want. So all you need to do is put your book and paper aside, because you won't need that. So the idea is we're going to laugh with intention while tapping on certain parts of our body, starting with our thigh.
Okay.
So the idea of the tapping, it gets both your parts, left and right hemisphere. There's a lot of science behind it, but we're just going to get into it.
Okay.
So you're going to start by tapping your thighs.
All right.
And alternating left and right. And high rhymes with thigh. So you're going to start by laughing high, 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 high. So go with me. High, 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 high. And then your stomach like Santa Claus. Ho, 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 ho. And then Tarzan on your chest. Ha, 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 ha. Then behind your neck like a crazy person. And then over your head like you just don't care. Ha, 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 ha. And then your thighs again. High, 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 high. Ho, 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 ho. Ha, 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 ha. One more time. Hi, ho, hi.
Oh my gosh. I'm just wondering if anyone listens and this is their first episode.
Oh yeah. You're either going to have them for life or they're never going to listen to you.
Yeah, they're like, that's enough podcasting for one day.
Oh man.
I actually feel I'm like buzzing.
I know, it's a good buzz. I feel great right now too.
So sometimes you said you'll go off like into the bathroom or something.
Yeah.
What, like at work?
Yeah, at work.
And so
and I'll just be.
So people will hear like down the hall probably.
Well, I don't do it quite as vigorously as I might do. And this is one of those things. If you tell people you're doing it, and then it's okay. But don't do laughnosis in the middle of a busy crowd.
Yeah.
That without telling anyone, then you might get arrested.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, good advice.
All right, I think that's a good way to wrap up the session. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of these really fascinating, important, and relevant points about pain management, mindset, even about culture and travel and community. And I know there's a few things that you wanted to plug, things that perhaps the listeners can take advantage of within the next few days. if you want to share that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm still buzzing a bit from the laughnosis. So the first thing is that I have, within the online Rethink Pain Workshop, I'm bringing in experts each month that I interview on my Rethink Pain podcast. You can get that on iTunes and Spreaker, and I think somewhere else, but I just started it, so I'm actually pretty bad at promoting it. But you can check that out. I have Neil Pearson, so he's the expert that first got me into it. He was my first mentor in this pain education world. The first interview I have on the podcast is with him, and he's going to be coming in on Saturday, January 19th, so in a couple days from now at 9 o'clock New Zealand time, giving a presentation to teach a bit of the fundamentals of yoga. Mm-hmm. So he's a physio, but also a yoga instructor. And I'm really excited about this because he'll be setting the bar to each month having some new information come in. Because if someone has complex or persistent pain, you'll have my online module, but then I know I'm not the best person or the only person that can give this education. Yep. And the more variety of techniques, but also people teaching it, the more opportunities someone will have to improve. So if you check out www.rethinkpainworkshop.com, there's information that if you join before January 19th, then you can actually get on that live webinar and learn from him live and be able to ask questions from me and him. So that's I'm so excited about that. I've been waiting to do this for legitimately years. Yeah. And this is all coming into going in this Saturday. So I'm very excited about it. And then the other thing is I put on every 3 months a 1 day to improve workshop, which is my Rethink Pain Workshop, and then dozens of techniques. Laughnosis is one of them. And I go through what it is, how it works, and then practice it, and then go into the next. So by the end of the day, after having some awesome food from the daily grinds, you're just feeling empowered and ready to take on the world. And that next one is February 23rd. And there's an early bird that you can, if you register before the 19th, so the Saturday, then you can get $50 off for that as well. Okay.
And did you say where it's being held?
Oh, no, I did not. Yep. Pofocado. It's in Whakatane, and it's all the information's on the website for it. They've been an awesome host and an awesome facility, and that brings me to the last thing, which is my Whakatane Rethink Pain Workshop. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I'm passionate about giving this education for that everybody can be a part of. So once a month, I do it based out of Pofocado on every second Thursday evening from 5:30 to 7:30. And it's a donation, and all the donations goes to Pofocado. Okay. So we had a couple $100 last year that we were able to put in, and even if you don't have the money to bring in, you can. They said that you can even bring food donations or donations to go for crew for resale as well. So that's really awesome.
For some people who don't know, what is Pofocado?
So it's a community partnership within Whakatane that allows people to teach and allows people to come in and learn. So they have a lot of really great courses on there, from crafting types things to, I think I saw a kombucha type thing. Like, it's anybody who wants the opportunity to provide a low cost opportunity for Whakatane and the Eastern Bay of Plenty can go through Pofocado. So they've been absolutely amazing to work with, and I'm really happy to have that relationship.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming and sitting down with me today. And again, I'll post all of the links for your website and podcast and stuff like that to the show notes so people can find that. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Until next time, keep living and loving life to its full potential.